In the previous video, we looked at input validation and user-controlled loops. In this video, we will look at running totals and Sentinel values in Java. Now, a running total is the summation of a sequence of numbers which is updated each time a new number is added to the sequence by adding the value of the new number to the previous running total. And I think this will become clear when we look at an actual example. So I'm going to start with an example where I'm declaring the number of days there. We also have a variable for the sales per day, which will be double. And then I'll also have a running total, which will be my total sales. And then we will need a string input to get the user's input on how many days do we want to have sales. So basically what the example is that I want to do there is to ask the user first off, for how many days do you have sale figures, or for how many days should we get sales from you? And then the user will say, well, let's say 5 days, and we will save that value into days. And then we were going to ask him, right, for day 1, give me the sales. And then I'm going to save day 1's sale into sales. And then after he's given me the sale, I will add that sale to total sales. And then I ask him again. Let's say he said 5 days. So I'm going to ask him for 5 days sales. So then for every day, I'm going to save that day's sale into the sales variable and then add that to my running total, which will be total sales. So this is my running total. And your running total should normally be initialized to a value. In this case, we're going to start with 0 and then keep on adding to it. Okay, so we're going to ask the user there, and that's why I use the string input there, because we're going to use the JOption pane again. So we're going to say JOption pane.show input dialog, and we're going to ask the user the question, for how many days, just get that away, for how many days do you have sales, let me just go to new line, figures. Right, so that's the question we ask. For how many days should we basically run the loop and get the total sales? And then that number is whatever the user types is then as a string into input. And now we need to convert that. So I'm going to use the days variable and I'm going to convert that to an integer. What am I going to convert? Whatever the user typed. So that's in input. So I'm converting the input that the user gave me to an integer, and now we can use it. So I'm going to run the for loop the amount of times that the user indicated now. So I'm going to start with, let's call it count. I'm going to start with a counter starting at position 1 or 1, and then I'm going to say count less than or equal the amount of days that the user indicated. And then I must increment my count variable. Now, in our previous examples, we actually started, most of the times we started at 0 there. If I start at 0, I can leave out the equal sign there, and then it will run the same amount of times. So let's say I'm saying I want to run this loop 2 times, which is the number of days is 2. Then it will go for 0 and 1. Those will be the 2 days. And then less than days, which would be 2. Now 0 and the 1 will still be less than 2. So those are the 2 values that we will get, is the 0 and the 1. But if I change that to a 1, then I need to put the equal sign there to get the same number of times for the for loop to execute. So for instance, again, if we say 2 days, then it's going to be 1. And if it increments, it's going to go to 2. Is 2 still less than days? No, it's not less than 2, but it's equal to 2. So it will work exactly the same way. We will have it then for 1 and 2 instead of for 0 and for 1. And why do I want to start at the 1 there? Because I want to say, please enter the data for day 1. So I don't want to say day 0. Right, so in the for loop, we're going to ask the user a question again. We want to get the sale for that specific day. So we're going to use the input variable again and use the JOption pane again to get some input from the user. And this time we'll ask, enter the sales for day, and then we're going to ask him or her, the user, which day. In this case, it is count. So basically what's going to happen is we're going to say enter the sales for day, and then it's going to show me the value where the loop is currently at. So the very first time the loop runs, it will show me enter the sales for day 1. Then we increment, and it will go and say the 1 becomes a 2, and then we'll say enter the sales for day 2. And so we'll carry on day 3, day 4, day 5, depending on what the user gave me there for the input of how many days should we run this loop. Okay, so that we got the sales for the day, and now that input should be converted to a double again. So now you can see that one is a double. We needed an int for the number of days there. We needed an int, but for the sales figures, the guy could tell me what for day 1 there was 34.50. So we need to work with floating point values here. So I'm going to basically convert that input that the user gave me. Just go back there. So it is double dot parse double, and we're going to pass in the input there, and that input what the user typed will then be converted to a double, so we can save it in sales. So now after these two lines, we have a double value that is the sales for that specific day. And this is now where the running total comes in. So I'm going to say now total sales will be the previous value of total sales plus this new sales value that we just got from the user. So obviously the previous value for total sales will be 0 the very first time you run it. So 0 plus whatever the user said for the sales will then become the new value for total sales. So in this way, every time the loop runs, we'll be adding to this specific total called total sales, and that we call a running total. Okay, so an easier way to do this to get exactly the same result is not to say total sales equals total sales plus sales, but just to say plus equals sales. Now what will that do? It's exactly the same thing. It will be total sales equals total sales plus sales. So we're adding to total sales, which is currently 0. Then when we're done with the for loop, we can just show a message dialog there again. Show message dialog, null for the first argument. And I'm going to go to a new line for the second argument. And now we need to give the message to the user. So I'm going to say the total sales is, or the sales are, and we're going to give him the sales value. Let's say working with dollars there or whatever. So it's going to say the total sales are, and then we're going to show the amount for the user. So we're going to use a plus there, and then it's going to be that total sales variable. And then because we are working with the J option pane, we're going to say system.exit, passing in the 0 there, just to make sure it exits a bit faster. Okay, so what have we done here? We've asked the user for how many days should we have sales. Then the user types, let's say 5. That 5 will be converted to an integer and saved into the days variable, which is declared as an integer. Now we go into the for loop. We will start at position 1 or at number 1. So we declare a new variable. This is our loop control variable, and it's initialized not to 0 but to 1, because we want to say enter the sales for day 1, day 2, day 3. We don't want to start with 0. Because we don't start with 0, I need to add the equal sign there. Okay, so now in this case, we will start from 1 up until the number of days that the user indicated. So let's say the user indicated 5 there, that it will be from 1 up until 5, but 5 will be included. So that will run the loop 5 times. And then we're going to ask, enter the sales for day 1, enter the sales for day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5 every time the loop runs. We get that value as a string, convert it to a double, save it into sales. And then we take our total sales variable, which is currently 0 right at the beginning, and we keep on adding that sales value to total sales. And after that, we'll get a total for all of the days sales. And that we call a running total. So let's quickly run this and see how it prints out. Right, so it asks us for how many days do we have sale figures. So let's say for 3 days, to make it easy. The sale for day 1, let's make it 10.50. Let's make day 2 20.50. And let's make day 3 30.50. And then it gives us the sales for $61.50. But now you can see it's a .5 there. So is it now 5 cents or is it 50 cents? So just another thing for this video is how do we print out decimal values or floating point values in a nice way? So for this, we can use the decimal format class. And I'm going to declare this one as, let's just call it Let's call it $. Right, decimal format $, equals new decimal format. Now, what you place inside of, well, this one accepts a specific pattern as a string. So the way that you assign this value will depend on your output. What do you want for your output? So in this string, we can use hashes and we can use zeros. So let's say I'm going to have some text here directly underneath that. So basically what this means, the hash means that if there is something in this digit's position, show it. If there's nothing, don't show anything. What does the zero mean? If there's something in that position, show it. But if there's nothing, place a 0. Okay, so in this way, when we say hash 0.00, it will format it on the other side of the dot. If there's 2 zeros, it will round it off to 2 decimal places. If I put a 3 zeros there, it will round it off to 3 decimal places. So you can go and play around with this pattern a bit, but the hash basically means if there's a digit in that position where you place the hash, then show it. Otherwise, don't show anything. And then the 0 means if there's something in that position, show it, but if there's nothing, put a 0 there. Okay, so let's see how we can format this one now. So a nice way of doing this is maybe adding more hashes there and putting a comma there, so you can show the thousands as well, comma separated. So this one will basically be something like, if I can place that again directly underneath it, we could have something like 2,000, let's say 2,000 Rand, like that. Okay, so that's basically the notation. The hash will just place something there, but after the 1, 2, 3, fourth one, just after the fourth one, it will place a comma there, so we can see the thousands. Okay, so I'm going to leave that pattern as this, and then the way you apply it then will be to go to the value that you want to print out, which is total sales. And I'm just going to say $.format, and then in brackets, I need to place the value that I want to format. So I'll put in total sales. So it's $, the one that you defined there at the top, .format, and then placing in total sales. So basically this one should give us 2 decimals rounded now. So if we run that again, so how many days do you have sales figures? So let's say 3 again, 10.50, 20.50, 30.50. And you can see it's nicely rounded now to 2 decimal places. A Sentinel value can be used to notify the program to stop acquiring input. So I'm going to explain this in an example as well. So basically what I want to do is to ask the user to enter a value. So I'm going to have a variable called value, and that value we will double for the user. So I'm going to also have an integer there and call it double value. So let's say the user enters a 2, then we will double the 2 to a 4. And if he enters a 3, we will double the 3 to a 6, and so forth. So we're just multiplying it by 2. Okay, and then we must allow the user to keep on asking the question, or giving us a value for the question that we're asking. So we're going to ask, please enter a value to double, and then he will keep on adding or entering numbers to double until he chooses to stop. And this is what we call then a Sentinel value. So let's get input from the user quickly. So I'm going to ask the user, let's say JOption pane dot show input dialog, and we're going to ask the user the following question: please enter a value to double. But we're going to add to that. So I'm going to add some text there as a bracket, and I'm going to say 0 to stop. So if you don't want to double another number anymore, then you can just add a 0 that you can stop this program from running. So we will keep on allowing the user to enter a value to double and double it for him until he enters 0. So I chose my Sentinel value here to be a 0. That's the one value that will stop my loop from executing. Now, why did I choose 0 there? Because I think everyone can double a 0. So nobody would usually ask that question, please double a 0 for me. It will just be a 0 again. So that's why I chose that one. So normally choose your Sentinel value as one that will basically never be asked or never be used unless they want to stop. Right, so now we need to convert that value. So we've got value declared there at the top, and we want that one as an integer. So I'm going to say integer.parseInt, convert that integer now, or that string, to an integer. So there's the string. Please enter a value to double. The user enters 2, for example. We save that into input. We convert input to an integer, and we save it into value. Now we can use a while loop to help us to keep on asking the user to enter a value to double until he enters a 0. So we're going to keep on repeating what we're going to do in the while loop while the value is not equal to 0. So while the value that the user enters is not a 0, we will keep on doubling it for him. So we will say double the value, or double value, that's the variable that we declared at the top, should be the value that the user entered, but we're going to multiply that by 2. And then let's just give the answer to the user. So we're going to say joption_pane.show message dialog, null for the first argument, for the second argument, the message. So we're going to say, okay, let's just have a string there, and then we're going to say plus the value, plus, and we'll have another string there. So we're going to have the value that the user entered, let's say 2, and then 2 squared, or 2 not squared, multiplied by 2 will be then the answer that we give him. So we're going to say value, the value that you entered, doubled is, and then we're going to show him that doubled value. So it's going to be double value, the one that we doubled for him. So we're going to enter first what he typed, that value that you typed, doubled is double value, which is your value multiplied by 2. Okay, so that's the joption_pane. And then this loop, if the loop runs again, we will keep on doing the same thing over and over again. So it's very important again to remember your rules for a loop. First things first, there's a loop control variable. So the loop control variable is the value. So there's the value that the user entered. Remember, we first get it from input and then we convert it to a value. So that is my loop control variable, and it is initialized there by the user's input. Then we check the loop control variable. But for this loop to exit somewhere, we must change that loop control variable. So in the loop, I will ask this very same question again. So I'm going to copy that and paste it there. We're going to ask the user again. Let's just remove the string declaration there. You cannot declare something twice. So input will then be again, we're going to ask the user again, please enter value to double, 0 to stop. He enters the value again. Then it goes to the loop. It checks if the value is not a 0, double the value, print out the result to the user. Then we ask again, please enter value to double, 0 to stop. Get the value. If the value is not a 0, double it again and give the result to the user. So you can see this will carry on and on and on until the user types a 0, then value not equal to 0 will return false and your loop will exit. Now, because we are using joption_pane, let's just add the system.exit at the bottom. So let's run this one quickly and see how it works. Okay, so we're still running the previous program. Let's just go to that play button there and run it. Please enter value to double. So I'm going to enter 2 there. 2 doubled is 4. And then you can see it keeps on asking me. If I place a 3 there, 2 times 3 equals 6. If I place a 4, it will give me 8. A 5 will give me 10. And so I can keep on adding values there and it will double it for me. Unless I type a 0, which is my sentinel value, the value that will stop the loop from executing, and then everything stops.